Mara and the river. The river was the first thing Mara heard when she woke. Low, endless, like the earth itself was whispering secrets. Her room smelled faintly of cedar and last night's rain, the thin curtains stirring against the cracked window frame. For a moment she stayed still, watching the faint morning light draw pale lines across the floorboards, and wondered if today would be the day she finally left. She had been gathering fragments for months. Coins tucked into the lining of her coat, a folded map that smelled of dust and ink, a list of names she never dared read aloud. None of it felt quite real, not yet. But the world beyond her small town had been calling in ways she could no longer ignore. Through stories overheard at the tavern, through letters half-burned in the hearth, through the river itself, rushing toward somewhere else. Outside, the bells began to ring. 3 sharp notes, too early for any festival, too jagged for a wedding. Mara's breath caught, and in that instant she knew the choice would no longer be hers to postpone. The bells carried across the valley, colliding with the cries of startled birds. Mara pressed her palms against the mattress, feeling the straw shift beneath her, as if even her bed had grown restless. The sound unsettled her in ways she could not yet name. She rose and moved to the window, the curtain brushing against her wrist like a plea to stay hidden. Below, the village was already stirring. Doors swung open, children were called back inside, and figures hurried toward the square, their faces turned toward the steeple as if the tower itself might reveal its secret. Mara's gaze lingered on the road instead, the single pale ribbon of earth winding away from the village, climbing the hill, and vanishing into the trees. She imagined her feet upon it, imagined the weight of her pack against her shoulders, imagined silence where the bells now clamored. But imagination could not quiet the unease creeping into her chest. Something had been set into motion. Something larger than her quiet longing, larger than her careful hoarding of coins and maps. She dressed quickly, each button fastened with the feeling that it might be her last in this room, in this skin of the life she had known. Downstairs, the fire in the hearth was a tired thing, more smoke than flame. She left it as it was, unloved and unattended, and stepped into the morning. The air was sharp and cool. The bells rang again, one long note this time, heavy enough to make the ground seem to tremble. Mara pulled her coat tighter. The choice she had been waiting to make was already dissolving in the air. The world had made it for her. At the square, the crowd pressed close, a tide of bodies drawn toward the steps of the chapel. The bell rope still swayed in the open doorway, and beside it stood the steward, an austere man with a voice as spare as his frame. 3 short, 1 long, he called out, his words cutting through the hush that followed the final toll. You all know what it means. Mara felt the weight of silence ripple outward, heavier than any shout. Yes, they all knew. The bells had only rung that pattern once before in her lifetime, when she was too young to understand but old enough to remember the fear on her mother's face. Summons. The king's riders were on their way. Somewhere beyond the ridge, beyond the silver glint of the river, they were already approaching with their banners and their sealed decrees. Villages like hers were not called upon without reason, and never for reasons that left lives untouched. Mara's hand tightened around the map folded in her pocket. This was not how she had planned to leave, but perhaps she would not have to plan at all. The steward cleared his throat. Every household must send one. The riders will choose if you do not. The air grew taut, filled with the soft sound of people turning to one another. Eyes darted, weighing fates, searching for answers in neighbors' faces. Somewhere a child began to cry. Mara stood very still, the river's whisper in her ears. She thought of the road, of the names inked onto her hidden list. And she knew, before any hand was lifted, before any name was spoken, that the bells had told for her. The steward's eyes swept over the crowd like a blade. His hand lifted, and for a heartbeat Mara thought he might simply point, plucking someone from the mass like a hunter marking prey. Instead he called her name. Mara Elian. It was not shouted nor softened, just spoken, as if it had already been decided long before his mouth gave it shape. The sound struck her chest like a physical blow. Around her, villagers shifted, their relief immediate and unkind. A few dared a sympathetic glance, but most simply looked away. Her legs carried her forward without waiting for her mind's consent. She felt the heat of bodies parting, the sting of eyes pressing into her back, the heavy silence that followed her as she mounted the chapel steps. The steward regarded her with something like weariness, as though he had hoped the name might fall differently, but duty had bound his tongue. He leaned closer, voice low enough that only she could hear. "They'll be here by dusk. Be ready." And then louder to the gathered crowd. "The summons has its chosen. So it is." The bells gave one final peal, as if sealing her fate. Mara looked out over the faces below. Neighbors she had grown among, people whose voices and laughter had filled the years of her life, and felt already like a ghost among them. By dusk riders would arrive. By nightfall, her life would belong to something vast and unknowable. The river roared in her ears, fierce and insistent, carrying her name away. The day bled away in fragments, long shadows over shuttered windows, the smell of smoke and boiled grain drifting from doorways, the muffled murmur of voices that ceased when she drew near. Mara spent those hours as if in a dream, not packing, not moving, just listening to the slow unraveling of everything she had known. By dusk, the sky was the color of bruised fruit. A hush settled over the village as hooves struck the stone bridge across the river. The sound was measured, unhurried, each step belonging to something that did not need to rush because it could not be denied. The riders came 6 across, cloaked in ash gray, their horses bearing armor that caught what little light remained. No banners flew, but the seal of the crown glimmered on every bridle and breastplate, a silver sun split by a black line. Children clutched their mothers' skirts. Old men bowed their heads. Even the dogs fell silent. Mara stood at the edge of the square, her heart matching the rhythm of hooves. When the riders reined in, the leader dismounted, tall, helm under his arm, eyes searching the crowd with a detached certainty. He spoke with the weight of one reciting a script older than himself. "One has been chosen." His gaze fell on Mara almost before the words had left his mouth. "Step forward." The air seemed to fold inward. Every sound vanished but the drum of her pulse. Mara's body moved as though commanded not only by him, but by the river, the bells, by fate itself. She crossed the cobblestones, each step louder than the last. The rider extended a gloved hand. She hesitated, then placed her palm against the cool leather. His grip closed, unyielding. From behind, the steward's voice rang out, "Mara Elian answers the summons." And with that, the riders turned their horses toward the waiting road. Without a word, without farewell, Mara was pulled into their circle, swallowed by the motion of hooves and the press of steel. The village fell away behind her, shrinking into the deepening night. The riders pressed northward, their formation tight and silent. The road wound out of the valley, climbing through dark stands of pine where the air grew sharper with each mile. Mara glanced back once, just once, and saw her village as a scatter of lanterns below, fragile lights already swallowed by distance. Beyond the ridge, the land opened wide. Rolling fields lay silvered under the moon, dotted with the ruins of towers long since collapsed into the earth. The riders did not pause nor speak of them, but their presence was heavy, as if the stones themselves remembered the weight of war. Hours passed. The hooves of the horses struck sparks from the road, and every so often, Mara caught sight of distant fires across the horizon. Not villages, camps that sprawled like dark cities, their watchfires flickering against banners too far to read. The leader raised his hand, and the company slowed as the land dipped again. Before them stretched a river wide as a lake, its waters black beneath the moon. On the far shore stood walls, vast stone walls that gleamed faintly where torches licked across their heights. A fortress, or perhaps something more. Its towers rose like jagged teeth against the night sky, bristling with iron. The sight of it hollowed the breath in Mara's chest. "The citadel of Rin," one of the riders said at last, breaking the silence. His voice was flat, but something in it held the weight of reverence or fear. The others rode on, hooves drumming over the wooden bridge that spanned the river. Mara felt the structure tremble beneath them, as though even the bridge itself shuddered at the thought of carrying her across. The gates yawned open with a groan of chains. Torchlight spilled across the cobbled road, revealing carvings etched deep into the stone, lines of script in a language Mara did not know, but which seemed to hum faintly against her skin. She had thought the summons would deliver her to a court, to a hall of marble and velvet. But this place was different. This was not where a king ruled. The gates clanged shut behind them, the sound echoing like a death knell through the stone corridors beyond. Torchlight flickered along walls carved with strange reliefs, figures with elongated limbs, eyes too large, mouths frozen mid-scream. The air smelled of iron and smoke, tinged with something sweet, almost like honey gone rotten. Mara was led down a long hall, the riders flanking her like living shadows. Each step seemed to draw the walls closer, narrowing the space until the ceiling itself felt as if it might crush her. Somewhere above, a bell tolled again, low and resonant, but it was not the village bells. This one vibrated through the stone and bone alike. At the hall's end, a chamber opened, massive and cavernous. The ceiling soared beyond sight, lost in shadow, and at its center stood a figure draped in silver robes. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but Mara could feel its gaze. Keen, knowing, patient. "You have come," the figure said, voice like wind through hollow trees. Mara's breath caught. She had imagined kings and councils, scrolls and decrees, but not this. Not a presence that seemed older than the mountains, older than the river itself, older than the very world she had known. "You have been chosen," it continued, "not for what you are, but for what you carry." The figure lifted a hand, and a circle of light bloomed on the floor. Within it, shapes twisted and writhed, shadows coiling like living ink. Mara recognized some of them. Maps she had studied, names she had written, coins she had hoarded, but distorted, magnified, alive. "This is the ledger of becoming," the figure said. "It holds what has been, what is, and what may yet come. You are the first to walk its threads in a century." Mara felt the world shift beneath her. The river, the bells, the village, the riders, everything that had seemed real, fixed, immutable, now felt fragile, like smoke caught in a draught. "You must decide," the figure said, voice now a chorus of whispers, "which path to forge and which to let vanish into the dark." And Mara understood in that instant that the summons was not a journey. It was a choice, and its weight would reshape the world itself. Mara stepped into the circle, and the shadows writhed more urgently, responding to her presence. The air inside it was heavy, like inhaling a storm. She hesitated, hand hovering above the flickering shapes, her fingers trembling. "Do not fear," the hooded figure said. "It does not act without your consent. But it will test you." Her fingers brushed the first shape. Instantly, a vision flashed behind her eyes. A village swallowed by fire, a child reaching for her hand as the flames licked higher. Mara recoiled, stumbling back, heart hammering. The image vanished as quickly as it came, leaving her breathless. "It shows what is tied to you," the figure continued. "The ledger does not lie. It reflects choices already made, and paths yet possible. Touch another and see what might come." Mara glanced down again. The shapes shifted, teasing her, drawing her in. She reached out more cautiously this time. Her fingers passed through a coin she had hidden in her coat weeks ago. Instantly, a new vision bloomed. Herself, older, standing in a sunlit hall, surrounded by people she did not know, yet who looked at her as if she had always belonged there. Her pulse slowed, replaced by a rising clarity. The ledger was alive, yes, but not malevolent. It waited. It asked questions in the language of possibility. "You see, Mara," the figure said softly, "this is why you were chosen. Not because you seek power, not because you are brave, but because you can bear to see the paths unfold, and choose among them. Every coin, every name, every step you have taken leads here." Mara sank to her knees, overwhelmed and exhilarated. Her fingers hovered over another shape, a fragment of a letter she had never sent. She swallowed hard and pressed down. The vision that bloomed was of the river, wide and silver under a stormy sky, carrying her away on a current she could not yet name. Somewhere deep in her, a single truth settled. The world she had known was gone. From this moment on, she was the weaver of paths, the keeper of the ledger, and nothing would be certain again. Mara's fingers hovered over the next shape, a small, fragile thread she recognized immediately, a fragment of a letter she had never sent to her mother. The words had been simple, full of longing and apology, but their weight now pressed on her like stone. She closed her eyes and imagined the path she could take. One choice was safety. Leave the ledger, return to her village, live as if none of this had happened. The other was uncertainty. Follow the threads into the unknown, step fully into the power and danger the ledger offered. Her hand trembled, yet she pressed down. The thread glowed, and suddenly the visions unfolded around her in a whirlwind. The river, the citadel, the fires of distant lands, faces of people she had never met, all spun into a single, intricate pattern. And at the center, a small spark pulsed, the possibility of her own courage. "You have chosen," the hooded figure intoned, voice echoing like a chorus. "Not merely to witness but to act. That is the first step of becoming." Mara felt the shape dissolve beneath her fingers. When she opened her eyes, the chamber was quiet. The visions had settled into stillness, but their energy lingered, humming in her chest. The ledger had accepted her decision. It had begun to bend reality to the path she had chosen. Her first choice was simple, almost mundane. A single letter sent, a single connection restored. Yet already she could feel the ripple, small but undeniable, extending outward. Somewhere someone smiled because of it. Somewhere, a danger she had not foreseen shifted course. The hooded figure inclined its head. "Now you see. Each decision carries consequence. Each choice is a thread in the web of becoming. And the web is alive, Mara. It will ask more of you, and it will ask again. But you are ready." Mara exhaled, the weight in her chest easing slightly. She had stepped into the ledger, taken her first thread, and shaped a future, even if only a single strand. And somehow, amidst fear and wonder, she knew the world would never be the same again. The next morning, the citadel's gates opened to reveal a sky streaked with gray, the river's silver current now jagged with wind. Mara followed the riders down the stone path, the ledger secured under her cloak, her mind still buzzing with the weight of her first choice. They led her into the forest that hugged the citadel's walls, where the trees grew dense and ancient. The wind whistled through the branches, carrying whispers that sounded almost like voices. Mara's pulse quickened. Something in the air, something unseen, was watching, testing. A figure emerged between two oaks. A man, or perhaps a shadow shaped like a man. His eyes glowed faintly, like embers beneath a hood of shifting darkness. The riders halted, leaving Mara alone with the apparition. "You carry the ledger," it said, voice like gravel and smoke. "Do you know what that makes you?" "I," Mara faltered, the wind catching her words. "I'm chosen. That's all I know." The shadow moved closer. The ground beneath Mara's feet seemed to pulse. Trees groaned, branches curling toward her as if to grasp. "Chosen," it repeated. "Yes, but chosen carries responsibility. And responsibility carries pain." Before she could respond, the figure lunged. Not with weapon, but with force. A wave of shadow that sought to swallow her, to erase her from the path she had begun to weave. Mara staggered, heart hammering. Instinct drove her hand to the ledger. She pressed a finger against the nearest glowing thread, the one that carried her first choice. Light flared, and the shadows recoiled, hissing like water on stone. The figure faltered, and Mara realized. The ledger did not merely show the future, it could defend it. "You will learn," the figure said, retreating, "that every thread has cost. Every choice awakens something. Be ready." The riders regrouped around her, silent as stone. Mara's chest heaved, but she felt a spark of triumph. She had faced the first trial. She had not yielded. Yet the forest seemed quieter now, and Mara knew the calm was only temporary. The ledger was alive. So too was the danger it drew. The forest's edge opened onto a landscape Mara had never imagined. Rolling plains stretched beneath a sky painted in bruised purples and golds, dotted with distant settlements that glimmered like scattered jewels. The river, now winding like a silver ribbon through the fields, marked a path deeper into lands unclaimed by her village's small maps. The riders rode in silence, their presence a steady drumbeat at her back. Mara's eyes roamed the horizon. Hills rose and fell like waves frozen in time, forests gave way to rocky plateaus, and in the distance, a cluster of towers pierced the sky. Neither city nor castle, but something in between, alive with a quiet energy that hummed through the air. "This is the world you must learn," the leader said, voice low, almost reverent. "The ledger touches all it can reach. Every choice will ripple through these lands. Be vigilant." Mara felt the weight of the ledger against her chest. The threads inside still glowed faintly, reminding her of the power she had awakened and the responsibility it carried. She tried to imagine the ripples of her first choice stretching across this vast expanse. Small, perhaps, but undeniably real. As night fell, the riders made camp on a hill overlooking a valley. Fires flickered, casting long shadows that danced like living things. Mara studied the stars. Unfamiliar constellations mirrored faintly in the ledger's glow. Each thread, each shape, seemed to pulse with possibility, tugging her forward. From the valley below came movement. Figures, neither fully human nor entirely shadow, emerged, their forms shifting like smoke over water. Mara's stomach clenched. The ledger's glow intensified at her touch, warning, guiding. "You have begun to walk the threads," the leader said beside her. "But the world beyond the citadel is not kind to those who hesitate. Your first true choice outside its walls is near, Mara. You will see the stakes, and you will feel their weight. Be ready." Mara's fingers brushed the ledger. Light flared, and she glimpsed a vision. Herself, crossing the valley, confronting the unknown figures, weaving the threads of her choices into the life she had begun to claim. With a deep breath, she mounted her horse. The riders followed, and together they descended toward the valley. The wider world awaited, vast, dangerous, and alive with secrets only the ledger could illuminate. The valley air was thick with mist, curling around Mara's horse's hooves like fingers reaching to slow her. The figures ahead shifted constantly, their shapes stretching and folding in ways that made her stomach twist. They had no faces she could read, no features to anchor them in familiarity, only eyes that glimmered faintly, reflecting the torchlight of the riders behind her. Mara's hand went to the ledger, the threads inside pulsing stronger with each heartbeat. She hesitated only a moment before pressing her fingers against one of the glowing strands, a vision of herself stepping forward, unafraid, and speaking with the figures rather than fleeing. Light rippled from the ledger, spilling around her like liquid silver. The figures halted. One stepped closer, its form stabilizing into something resembling a man draped in dark robes, its eyes a mirror of the ledger's glow. "You carry the power," it hissed, voice like wind over stone. "Do you understand what that means?" "I understand enough," Mara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am not afraid." The figure lunged, not with arms but with shadow, a wave of darkness meant to consume. Mara's fingers traced another thread in the ledger. Instantly, visions of possible defenses bloomed around her. A wall of light rose from the ground, a reflection of her courage, forming a barrier that held the shadow at bay. The other figures closed in, but each time Mara touched a thread, the visions guided her, showing her where to step, when to strike, how to bend the currents of possibility to protect herself and the riders. The battle was less of strength and more of choice. Each motion, each decision rippled through the threads. A miss, a hesitation, and the shadows might overwhelm her. But with every correct move, the figures faltered, dissolving back into mist. Finally, only one remained, the first figure she had confronted. It halted, eyes narrowing. "You have the ledger," it said. "And it has chosen you. But the world beyond this valley is older, darker, and less forgiving than you know. This is only the beginning." And then it vanished, leaving Mara standing in the thickening mist, her chest heaving, the ledger glowing softly in her hands, as if satisfied with her first victory. The riders gathered around her. Silence stretched between them like a taut string. The leader's voice was calm, but there was weight in it. You survived your first test in the wider world. But each thread you touch now will carry consequences far beyond what you can see. Remember that, Mara. She looked down at the ledger, its threads humming with potential. The first confrontation was over, but the true journey, the weaving of destiny across this vast living world, had only begun. The valley behind them fell away as the riders pressed onward, Mara straining to take in the vast expanse before her. Hills rolled endlessly, dotted with settlements that looked peaceful from a distance, but the ledger's threads pulsed unevenly, tugging at her chest. Some threads glowed brightly. Others flickered like dying embers. "They're nearby," the leader said softly, guiding her attention to a small village nestled between two hills. Smoke rose from chimneys, children ran along dirt paths, and a market stall displayed fresh fruit in the fading sunlight. Mara's first instinct was to admire it, to take in the calm. Then the ledger tugged. She hesitated, glancing down. Two threads rose sharply, one thick and strong representing the village itself, the lives of everyone inside. The other thin and wavering, a distant thread that led to a lone traveler caught on the windswept plains beyond. Mara could see the danger pressing toward him. Bandits, or worse, creatures the ledger did not name. A choice spread before her like an impossible map. Protect the village and let the traveler be lost, or save the traveler, potentially allowing harm to reach the village. Each thread throbbed with consequence. Her fingers hovered. She could feel the weight of lives she had never met, their fates suspended on the decisions she had yet to make. The ledger pulsed in answer, patient, unyielding, waiting for her to step fully into responsibility. Mara closed her eyes. The wind tugged at her hair, the distant river whispered of currents and journeys, and in that moment she understood. The ledger did not merely show what could be. It demanded what must be. Her hand pressed first on the traveler's thread. Light flared, stretching across the plain like a bridge. Mara saw the traveler shift, stumble, then find footing and escape the danger. Relief and fear collided inside her. The village threads pulsed violently, showing flashes of fire creeping toward it, but then stabilizing as Mara's focus shifted. She realized the ledger had not punished her for choosing one over the other. It had merely reflected reality's balance. Every choice carries cost, but some courage can create ripples that spare what matters most. The riders watched silently. The leader's voice broke the quiet. Your first moral test is done. You have chosen, and the ledger has responded. Never forget, the world beyond the citadel is alive, Mara. And it will demand more of you than courage alone. Mara exhaled, the weight of consequence still settling in her chest. She had saved a life, but the cost was visible and undeniable. Every decision from now on would stretch across the threads, tugging and twisting the lives of those she would never meet, and those she loved. The road ahead was no longer simply dangerous. It was moral, intricate, and relentless. The sun had barely risen when the ledger tugged insistently, threads thrumming like a heartbeat in Mara's hands. Ahead, the plains opened into a low valley where smoke rose not from chimneys, but from the flicker of torches moving in formation. Mara squinted, feeling a cold certainty settle in her chest. This was no wandering band of marauders. These were soldiers, or worse, organized, disciplined, and bent on destruction. The riders slowed, forming a protective arc around her. Mara studied the ledger, tracing threads that stretched from the approaching force to nearby villages, farms, and outposts. Every path she could see pulsed with danger. A single wrong choice could turn lives into ash. They move like a tide, the leader said, voice tight. We must decide quickly, intercept them or let them pass and minimize collateral damage. Mara felt the ledger's threads pull her in multiple directions. She could see flashes of possible strategies, ambush points, diversions, even illusions that could mislead the enemy, but each choice carried risk. A misstep could doom innocence. Her fingers hovered, and she remembered her first moral test: the traveler and the village. This was the same, magnified 1,000-fold. Lives depended not only on courage, but on foresight, on understanding how threads intertwined. Finally, she pressed her hand onto the strongest thread, the one representing the enemy's advance. Light flared, and a vision bloomed. The soldiers would take the northern ridge if left unchecked, leaving the village exposed. But if she could guide a small force to the ridge while creating a diversion elsewhere, they might avoid bloodshed entirely. "Follow my lead," she whispered to the riders, feeling the ledger hum with affirmation. "We split. Some of us draw them north, the rest circle around. We keep the villages safe." The plan was dangerous, almost impossibly so. Mara felt her chest tighten, but the ledger pulsed, reinforcing the path she had chosen. She urged her horse forward, threads of light weaving before her, marking routes and timing like an invisible map. The confrontation was chaotic. Horses rearing, soldiers shouting, arrows slicing the wind, but Mara's choices guided the riders. Every decision she made with the ledger's vision shifted outcomes. A band of villagers escaped through a hidden path, an enemy detachment was misled by illusions of fire and shadow, and the main force faltered just enough to allow the others to regroup. When the smoke cleared, Mara's heart still raced. The valley was scarred, but the villages remained standing. The enemy had been delayed, but not destroyed. She could feel threads still pulsing with danger, warning of future attacks. The leader approached, face shadowed but eyes bright. "You are learning, Mara. The ledger's threads are not merely guides. They are responsibility. You have bent strategy, risk, and consequence all." Mara lowered her hand, the ledger's glow softening. She realized then that the wider world was not simply full of unknown lands and strange creatures. It was a living, breathing tapestry of choices and consequences, and she had just begun to trace her place within it. The morning sun spilled over the plains, turning the valley golden, but Mara barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the ledger, which now pulsed with dozens of threads at once. Villages, travelers, enemy detachments, and even faint, distant threads she could not yet identify. Each moved independently, yet each influenced the others. A shift in one could ripple across all the rest. The riders waited silently, trusting her to lead. Mara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every life, every choice, pressing into her chest. She began with the threads closest to immediate danger, tracing paths with her fingers. She guided a fleeing caravan along a hidden ridge, nudged a small group of soldiers to block a pass, and redirected a wandering beast away from a settlement. Each move required concentration, timing, and foresight. One misstep could unravel everything. The ledger flared, illuminating possible outcomes. Mara realized that threads she had thought distant were connected. A choice to save the caravan affected the soldiers' position, which in turn altered the path of the beast and even the morale of villagers she had not yet reached. She had to think not linearly, but as if weaving multiple currents at once, predicting how each would collide. Hours passed in tense focus. Her fingers danced across the threads, weaving, separating, reconnecting. She felt exhaustion claw at her, but the glow of the ledger pulsed encouragement, guiding her hands toward optimal solutions. Slowly, the chaos began to settle. The caravan reached safety. The soldiers held their line. The villagers were warned and sheltered. Even the wandering beast had found its way back to the forest. The riders, sensing her mastery, tightened their formation around her. The leader's voice broke the heavy silence. "You are learning, Mara. The ledger does not merely respond to choice. It responds to comprehension. You are beginning to see the tapestry. Do not forget, however, each thread carries cost. Some choices cannot be undone." Mara exhaled, letting her hands fall to her sides. She had done it, her first lesson in weaving multiple threads. Yet the ledger continued to hum, more threads pulsing, more threads waiting. The wider world was vast, tangled, and alive, and the citadel's guidance had only brought her to the edge. Somewhere ahead, new dangers, new moral dilemmas, and new opportunities waited. Mara's fingers itched to touch the threads again. She had glimpsed what it meant to shape the world, and she knew that the ledger would never let her stop. The ledger pulsed in Mara's hands, faintly warning her before she even saw him. Across the ridge, a figure emerged, cloaked in shifting shadows that seemed to move independently of the wind. Mara's pulse quickened. The threads of the world quivered in response, as if recognizing another force at play. The figure stepped forward, pulling back his hood to reveal a young man, eyes glinting with a mixture of cunning and intent. Around him, faint threads shimmered, parallel to hers, twisting and colliding with the patterns she had been shaping. "I wondered when you would arrive," he said, voice smooth and confident. "I've been following the ledger's ripples for some time. You are competent. But do you truly understand the weight of what you hold?" Mara tightened her grip. "Who are you?" "Call me Kale," he replied, a small smile playing across his face. "Like you, I've been chosen. But unlike you, I've learned that threads are not merely guides, they are weapons." The threads between them pulsed, brushing against each other like fingers sparking with static. Mara could see the potential outcomes he was nudging toward. Paths that could trap villages, redirect armies, or turn her riders into unwitting pawns. Every choice she made now would be countered by his own manipulation. "You can't control everything," Mara said, trying to steady her voice. "Some lives aren't yours to play with." Kale laughed softly, the sound carrying across the ridge. "And yet here we are. The ledger chose both of us. Seems the world needs a lesson in balance. Or chaos. Shall we see which of us will shape it?" He extended his hand toward a cluster of threads, and Mara felt the ledger surge, warning her that the confrontation had begun. Every flicker of light, every thread, now pulsed with a collision of intent. She realized the fight would not be of strength or steel, but of foresight, moral judgment, and speed. The wind rose around them, carrying the scent of distant forests, rivers, and villages. Mara's mind raced. Every choice she made could protect lives, or imperil them, depending on how Kale reacted. She placed her hands firmly on the ledger, ready to weave threads in real time, each decision a spark against the tide of his own manipulations. This was her first true rival, one who could match her thought for thought, move for move. And Mara understood, with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, that the ledger had chosen this test deliberately.